2026 promises to be a year that is completely extraordinary in its scope, unlike any we've experienced ever in our lifetimes, many lifetimes actually. It's going to be filled with opportunity, it's going to be filled with action, maybe, hopefully, a little bit of adventure. But it's tricky to navigate, and it's tricky to navigate because so many things are changing at once. It is, after all, a fire horse year, and as such, I think we have to tread a little carefully. It's going to be volatile, it's going to be unpredictable. It's first one way, then it's another. I think it promises to be kind of exhausting, hopefully in a good way, but we'll see. And it was thinking about this volatility and the unpredictability that led me to make this video in the first place, because in times like this, and I don't think that this is the first time humanity's experienced something of this ilk, one thing that does remain predictable is human responses. The defaulting to the mean that I've been talking about for quite a long time in the videos, certainly for the last few months at least anyway. And so I've developed what I've been calling in my head a guardrail protocol, right? Based on that whole 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding techniques. You could call it a 2026 survival toolkit, I guess. So that when things get really volatile, when things get really unpredictable, when the uncertainty is really high and we're feeling the pressure, we can just take a moment to pause, run through these principles in our heads, and make sure that we are being proactive, or at the very least responsive, rather than reactive, because a lot of this year promises reactive behaviours, and these are the things that we want to avoid. Now, we'll go through it all in a little bit, but this year will reward those who are brave. It will reward those who are willing to put themselves outside of their comfort zone. But I do think it will punish those who try to remain within it. Punish is maybe the wrong word. A lot of the energy moves this year are brutal. There's no other way of putting it. But I think armed with this is my notes, the things I've written down. Armed with this, I hope that it can help you guide yourself to make sure that you are being responsive and proactive, making deliberate moves, rather than reacting in the heat of the moment or reacting from a place of emotion. So, hope it helps. So the first principle is understand the conditions and remind yourself of them frequently. What do I mean by that? Well, nothing about 2026 is a stable or normal year. That means the normal rules don't apply anywhere. And I think it would be a mistake to assume that they do. It would also be a mistake, and that's kind of the point of this principle, to assume that you are not affected by them. We are all affected by stuff. I think that this is going to start with a solar eclipse in Aquarius, which is going to be square Uranus in Taurus. That's happening on February the 17th. And that brings, well, volatility and unpredictability, really. I mean, the two things speak to both of those. So I want to make it clear, we're not witnessing the end of the world. That's not what this is. That's not what's going on. I think we are witnessing, though, the end of Western civilization as we understand it. And this is what happens, you know, civilizations rise and they fall. And the thing that I want you to bear in mind is that there will be a rise after this. It's just going to look different to what we've been used to. So the reason that I think that this is the case is that there are certain conditions that are almost as consistent as humans' responses to them. Things that tend to show up towards the end of a civilization's peak era. It's things like environmental degradation, civil unrest, financial instability. Hell of a lot of that around at the moment. Let me check notes. Corrupt leadership, or at least our awareness of the level of corruption in our leadership, which is probably more accurate. What else? External shocks, the four horsemen of the apocalypse, right? So famine, plague, war, natural disasters. Wonder if there are any of those in the offing for 2026. I think possibly. Demographic shocks and demographic instability. I'm seeing both of those. Demographic instability in terms of underpopulation or overpopulation, depending on where you live. But the demographic shocks that are caused when cultures who have little to no shared values are thrown together and suddenly required to live alongside each other, right? What else do we have? Oh, complexity. That's a big one. I've got a wicked quote here from a guy called Joseph Tainter, who is an historian and also apparently a collapse expert. Like, who knew such people existed? But they do. So I want to read you what he said. All civilizations eventually collapse under the weight of their accumulated complexity and bureaucracy. Societies are problem-solving collectives that grow in complexity to overcome new issues. However, eventually the complexity reaches the point of diminishing returns. After this point, collapse is inevitable. So just run through that list that I gave you. I mean, can we tick any of those off? I think we can. So I don't think there's any point in getting emotional about it. I don't think there's any point in keening at the moon about it. We just need to understand the conditions and all the intensity and complexity that will flow therefrom, which we are subject to, just like everybody else. So, predictable human responses to such things is we start to experience compressed timelines where everything feels urgent, right? We've got to deal with it now. Now, whether this is to just discharge the tension or make us feel like we have some element of control, which is probably the more likely. Should we go out in this field? It looks really nice. It doesn't matter. The end result is the same. Everything needs a response now. Aries energy will push that and really make everything feel urgent. And between you and I feel a lot of what's passing as urgent this year is going to be manufactured. I'm just going to leave that there. That's all I have to say on that. What else? Emotional contagion and polarization. Essentially, two things that we've seen going on probably since 2020, realistically, that are going to intensify as the energies get more and more overwhelming over the course of the year. What else to expect? Pressure to take sides immediately. Yeah, that's a thing. Moral certainty replacing nuance. And a certain amount of moral absolutism. What do I mean by that? Well, you either agree with me or you're evil. Right? It's the binary thinking, black and white, no space for the grey. We'll say more about that later on. Let me see, what else have I got here? Yeah, nothing turning on its own facts. Everything being single track narratives. Cognitive bias is going to be off the charts. I think that's already happening, to be honest. Rapid escalation from words to action or indeed violence. I'm sorry, there's no way that we can have Uranus as busy as he is, Mars as busy as he is. So much energy in the sign of Aries without there being a kind of violent edge to everything that follows thereafter, right? Just bear it in mind, because Aries will escalate, and what Aries does not understand is the concept of the aftermath or pacing yourself or consequences, right? So what else do I have here? reduced tolerance for ambiguity. Where people have a reduced tolerance for ambiguity, they reach for certainty. And when there is no certainty, and this is what I really want to get across with this video, there is no certainty, people start to double down on really absurd positions. Again, it's a way of trying to maintain some level of control over one's life, right? And wider. Anywho, heightened fear, anger, and righteousness. I mean, to some extent, these are Aries designations anyway. Although Aries is very much associated with bravery and courage, right? But sometimes an unhealed version of Aries energy is angry and righteous and actually incredibly afraid. And I think there's much more of a possibility of that kind of side of the Aries energy coming out, if we're not aware of it, at least anyway. Yeah, and Neptune in Aries is going to be doing a lot for that righteousness as well, right? Everybody's a spiritual warrior now. Anyway, right. The thing to understand about this is that in no way am I trying to suggest that it's because humans are bad. I want to get away from this narrative of the other side being evil, right? Because we're hearing it a lot in all sorts of ways. Bollocks. Right? What we're seeing is humans under load. Emotional load, mental load, to some extent physical load. You're working all the hours God sends to pay taxes that go to what? I don't know. No time for respite, no time for play. No time for adventure. No time for any of the cool things that, fire signs like to do. We should all like to do, actually. No time to just be. Spin around now. Yeah. Humans under load default to a monolithic mean. Now, if you want an example of what I'm talking about, think about 2020. I'm probably going to be referencing 2020 quite a lot over the course of what happens next, because history doesn't repeat, but it sure does rhyme. And I think that we are likely to see certain themes that were coming up around 2020 resurfacing again. Without conscious emotional, mental and spiritual discipline, you're likely to be part of that monolithic human fear response. And I don't want that for anybody. Yeah, I'm not trying to upset or panic anyone. It's like trying to objectively assess the volatility of the year that I can see coming. Let's understand what it is. If you're expecting clear, calm thinking from people, you're going to panic when you don't see it, right? If you're expecting volatility, if you're expecting things to be chaotic, if you're expecting to need to be kind of agile and, light on your feet, then when things start to crank up, you can adapt. You won't get caught up in it. And I think that's really, really important. The second principle is separate pressure from meaning. What do I mean from that? Well, we'd make a mistake if we assumed that because something felt intense, it must mean something absolute. The whole of this year, the intensity is going to come in waves, and I don't think there's going to be much opportunity to vent that. Intensity doesn't equal truth. Urgency doesn't equal importance. And emotion doesn't equal insight. doesn't matter how strongly you feel about something, it doesn't actually mean you're right. Like, your emotions are valid, they're telling you something, but are they accurately representing what's going on and what you must do as a result? Probably not. So I think it would do us all good to think about the possibility of repeating those things to ourselves like a mantra, right? Intensity doesn't equal truth, urgency doesn't equal importance, and emotion doesn't equal insight. Because unless we're aware of that, we're going to fall prey to things like exaggerated narratives, everything blown up out of proportion. We're going to fall prey to false binaries. I think there's been a few examples that I could draw your attention to that have occurred over the course of January. Outside the scope of this video though. Inflated stakes. If you misunderstand either the conditions that you're in or the fact that intensity and pressure doesn't mean that this is actually a thing, you're going to feel like you're under a lot more threat than you actually are. The final thing to sort of mention at this point is also premature conclusions. You're just leaping to a conclusion and assuming that it must be right because everything feels very intense. I think although there's going to be points where we're called to move and move fast, pivot, if you will, a little bit of thinking is going to go a long way. Making sure that we're not jumping to conclusions, because that definitely falls under reactive. That we permit ourselves just a moment to make sure that we have all of the information that we need before we take the next step. Principle 3, understand how people behave under extreme pressure. And this one's important because I think it will go a long way to separate you from the madness of crowds. People under extreme pressure fairly consistently exhibit the following fairly predictable behaviours. Impulsivity, right? I've got to do something right now, otherwise, the sky is going to fall. Think about all the impulsive decisions that you've made over your life, particularly when they were off the back of something that felt like it was crisis-ridden. Rarely were they the right moves, and often when the tense energies kind of abated somewhat, we see where we would have been far better just hanging on for a minute and seeing if it really was what we thought it was before lashing out or doing something a little bit rash, Outsourcing judgment to the dominant narrative. I'll probably come back to this one, to be honest. But why is this a problem? Because thinking is hard. Right? In any given situation, thinking is hard. If you've come in and sat in on any of the classes that I've done over at Circle, we talk about this a lot. Your subconscious is working in the background, like scanning for threats at all times. Doesn't sleep. Your conscious mind, you actually only use maybe 5 to 10% of your day if you're really active. Most of the stuff we do is on autopilot. And, when our subconscious hands over something that it thinks is important, if we don't take the time to stop and examine it, this is where we end up getting triggered by things and then feeling entirely justified in the actions that we take next, even though just a moment of reflection would show us that maybe we were falling prey to our own exaggerated narratives, Absolutism. If you disagree, you're evil. There's no room for dissenting views. And dissenting views are important. The heretics that sit at the fringes of fucking society are important. Why? Well, quite often the heretics are proven right. But society as a monolith isn't quite ready to accept what they had to say, you know? What we really don't need this year is fucking echo chambers. And if I'm honest, I think since social media started to be a thing, what it's done is enabled insane levels of echo chamber-like thinking. So if thinking's hard and you're in an echo chamber, outsourcing your judgment to whatever the dominant narrative is just going to see you swept up. Projection. Assigning fear to external enemies. Leading people to accuse others of what they themselves do. It's fucking wild when you watch projection in action. And to be fair, we all do that to some extent or another. But I think where we're aware that we have the capacity to do it, we tend to do it less, or we catch ourselves in the moment and we stop. Now, the projection's important as a concept, because if we're not aware of it, we will quite genuinely react as though we are under threat by the behaviours of somebody else, right? Because they're triggering our shadow somewhere in the background. Like, this is important. Be aware of your own ability to project. Short-termism, trying to solve the issue right now at the expense of long-term justice, like long-term things actually being done right. If I sound like a Saturn-ruled person, you'd be right. Saturn is my chart ruler. There's always consequences. And things that are done in the heat of the moment very rarely turn out to be right. Principle 4. What you do matters more than the outcome you're trying to achieve. What do I mean by that? Well, linearity and predictability are disappearing, so we can't anchor to what we think will happen, or should happen, or what we're afraid will happen, or what is being strongly intimated might happen if we don't do as we're told. If you want an example of that, look at the certain, I don't know what it was like for everyone else, but certainly in the UK, the very strong intimation that if you didn't have a certain medical procedure, you wouldn't be able to travel. So many people rushed out and got it because they thought they would need it to travel. The evidence for those who actually sat back and waited was that that wasn't necessary at all. What was being implied didn't match the reality of the situation. And taking a bit of time just to see what happened would have prevented a lot of people engaging with that. A lot of people who now regret that action. And that sort of brings me to the next 5 points that I've got here, which are kind of like a subdivision of point 4. 1. Delay irreversible decisions. If the thing can't be undone, it should not be decided at or executed at peak emotional intensity. You've got to recognise certain things when done can't be undone. And if you're stressed, if you're emotional, if you're feeling everything's very intense, if you're feeling overwhelmed, understand that your executive function is compromised and you shouldn't be making decisions like that. Not at this time. Reduce reactivity, not awareness. Now, I've been talking about this a little bit in the videos I've made recently. Like, situational awareness is really, really important. You've got to know what's going on around you. But to some extent, you've kind of got to be like oil on water, you know? Sit on top of it, for sure, but don't mix with it. Don't take it into yourself. Maintain as far as possible perspective and proportionality. Not everything requires a full force response. Subtlety, nuance, and awareness are not actually given to be Aries traits at all, right? So we can expect those things to disappear. And instead, we must do this, and we must do this, and we must do this. And when you're doing that all at peak emotional intensity, mistakes will be made. Preserve your options. Don't lock yourself into single narratives or group identities. Why? Because you lose the flexibility to change your position as and when new information comes along. Yeah, I've written down here as a sideline point. If changing your position would bring round or bring onto your head the ire of the group, the community that you are in, you know, having that little bit of flexibility, that sort of stuff, then you should be seriously thinking if you're in the right group of people. Like I said, functional societies require dissent and differing opinions. That's how we problem solve, not echo chambers. Be wary of adding to the noise. This really is a big one of speak less and listen more. Think always and let that cleaner thinking guide your actions. Individual responsibility, not here, okay, that's just my notes. We have an individual responsibility to the collective to not actually muddy the waters for the rest of them either. I think we could all do with listening a little more and speaking a little less. When you think about people's conversations, quite often they're just waiting for you to stop talking so they can insert their opinion here. I mean, how much actual communication is going on there? Probably very fucking little, right? Anyway, that individual responsibility is, to some extent, holding space for others to be able to come to their own conclusions too. And I think that's really important. Principle number 5 is be aware of what not to do, right? Absolute guaranteed things that we should not be doing. After the dust has settled, people tend to regret how reactive they were in the heat of the moment, for sure. Things like public commitments made at peak emotional pressure. I said basically fucking peer pressure, right? That's what we called it when I was a kid. Moral grandstanding. It always comes back to bite you in the arse. No exceptions. Might take a while, but it'll get there. Fucking hell. I think I need some glasses. Let's see what I've written here. Acting to be seen rather than to be actually doing something useful. Yeah, whether that's to give the impression that you have your shit together or signalling a performative act. It's a waste of fucking effort. It really is. It's not effective, it's not efficient, it's not useful. Yeah. We don't want you performing your virtue to the group that you want to stay a part of, because what is that actually achieving? There's nothing there about authenticity. There's nothing there about, being your own person. It's like, look at me. Look what I'm doing. Accept me. Nah, got no time for that. Remember, this is a marathon, not a sprint. A lot of future regrets could be altogether, look at my notes, prevented by doing less, not more. Why? If you don't give yourselves time to weigh up the information, the possibility of manufactured narratives, reactivity that is coming from your triggered emotions, you're more likely to react, without checking your actions long enough to make sure that you're actually right. You're also more likely to do considerably more that will need unpacking and walking back at a later date. This is not a plea for passivity or inactivity. It's a plea for check your fucking self before you do something, say something, act, condemn, judge, put in your fucking verb here, anywhere you like. Yeah. Principle number 6, understand what courage and sovereignty actually look like. Most people completely misunderstand these two behaviours when the energies become volatile. Yeah, we think about the level of tension in 2020. Think about how the collective was policing itself, right? And it became everybody doing what they were told was a virtuous act. Courage and sovereignty is not constant action and immediate responses, right? Trying to get in first to do the thing that we've been told to do. Patience is a virtue, for sure. Self-restraint is a fucking virtue as well. Courage and sovereignty doesn't look like loud certainty. It's actually an incredibly brave thing to say, well, I don't really know what's going on, and I'm just gonna hang back a sec, just to make sure I'm not about to make a massive mistake. In fact, I would go as far as to say, what's that old saying, right? The loudest barrels make the most noise. Anybody who is claiming loudly that they are certain and they are right is going to be almost certainly incorrect, wrong. Not doing you any favours if you listen to them. Now, the last one, courage and sovereignty is not, and can I just take a moment to say this with my full fucking chest, it's not public alignment. I say this as someone who in 2020 was going, yeah, I'm not sure a lot of this makes sense, you know. No, I'm not sure that's a good idea. I mean, okay, I'm taking the time to educate myself, like, I don't understand how we got from here to here. It takes a strong kind of character to stand apart from the group, particularly when the group is signalling their virtue to fuck, or is coming from a place of great fear and overwhelm, which they were, to stand apart and say, no, I'm sorry, I think you're wrong. I'm sorry. This jars with my integrity, I can't do this thing. Or even when I say it doesn't fucking make sense. Like, I do not want to see a repetition of what we saw in 2020, but I suspect we're going to see it. I suspect some of us are going to be back on the fucking fringes again. And that's okay. It's all right, we've done it once, we'll do it again. Doing as you're told is not actually a virtuous act. Compliance is not actually a virtuous act. And a lot of people misunderstood that in 2020. So what does courage actually look like? Tolerating uncertainty without pushing for the swiftest resolution. Yeah. Understanding the complexity of the moment without oversimplification. Just do this thing and then it'll be fine. No. I mean, what's collapsing here is complexity. Which is built of layers and layers and layers and layers of things. To make it simple, to say one person caused this or one event caused this or something, is to completely misunderstand where we are. Resisting pressure to conform or to comply if it doesn't make sense or jars with your personal integrity. I mean, this is so fucking huge. So fucking huge. I saw a meme about 3 weeks ago, and it said, who you were during COVID is who you are. And I thought, all right, I'm pretty fucking happy with that, actually. I didn't give in to fear, I didn't give in to pressure, and there was much pressure. I stayed informed, I did my fucking due diligence, I ran it through my own critical thinking skills, and I was prepared to stand on my own, and I did stand on my own I lost my entire fucking friendship group. People fucking... There was a paper going around at one point saying that people who wouldn't wear masks were sociopaths. It's like, aye, all right. No, bullshit. Just a scant year later, by the time my daughter had started her psychology degree, they were using the whole mask thing as an example of people who had a particular psychological trait, which meant that their judgment of a situation was more important than the group's. And this was being held up as a good thing. That was a year later. Shit changes. You've got to be prepared to strunk it out, as my kids would say. Courage is also exercising personal restraint and discipline. And that's going to be difficult this year, I think. So the final principle, principle number 7. Do not expect immediate resolution. Periods of erratic, intense upheaval and volatility do not resolve cleanly. The events are fast and the consequences unfold slowly. Like 2020 is a really good example of that, right? 6 years later, the landscape looks very fucking different to what everybody thought was going on at the time. Meaning will be understood later and narratives will absolutely change. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting I put the word meaning in there because to some extent for me that there's a Neptunian aspect to that. There are always many levels that we can understand things, right? And if we are going through some big consciousness shift now, and I really do believe that we are, then meaning has to change. By definition, it will change. You think about all the personal work that you've done on yourself for however long you've been doing this, right? In my case, solidly for like 7-8 years now, right? There was a narrative that we all worked to before we started the work, and that might have been, childhood abuse, everything was awful, victim complexes in my case, all those sorts of things. The meaning of my life was that. And as my consciousness shifted, even those events that have passed that I thought that I understood, now I attribute a different level of meaning to them. I see things very, very differently. At the very least, we should hold on to the thought that meaning is a product of the level of consciousness that is considering the situation, Don't be quick to chase closure or tidy endings. There aren't going to be. I said, events are going to be fast. To some extent, they might be a little brutal. It may feel like a wrecking ball has run through the air. But the consequences of the shifts are going to be, in my opinion, years in the unpacking. I'm still unpacking 2025, man. Well, still unpacking my childhood, right? Don't expect a tidy resolution. If you chase these tidy endings, if you chase closure way, way before it's time, you're just going to exhaust yourself, and in all likelihood, you're going to come to the wrong conclusion. And I don't want that. For you, for me, for anyone. So the last page of my notes here is essentially just a kind of summary conclusion. And what I'm looking to do is trying to bring all of these principles together into essentially a code of conduct, right? That ultimately is looking to preserve your integrity, keep your mind clean, and allow you to start looking for opportunities rather than reacting in the heat of the moment. So, the points of summary. Move slower than the crowd. If you've ever looked into crowd psychology, and this is something I've been fascinated by forever, right? So I have a book. Fuck, I forgot what it's called, right? But it's by Gustave Le Bon, about the study of crowd psychology. You'll know that actually humans en masse are really stupid. And it's not even like you can attribute it to the person with the lowest IQ in the group. No, humans en masse are really, really stupid. We become highly reactive. I was listening to a really interesting podcast, even just yesterday, about how there is a centre of the brain, within the brain for humans, that actually deals with punishment of others, and how it kind of lights up, and it's a little bit addictive. So when that part of the brain is getting engaged, and you're right in the middle of a group of people who are all feeling the same, like this is when, well, I don't, fuck it, I'm just going to say it. This is when atrocities happen. And those who can make you believe absurdities will make you commit atrocities, right? This is the sort of shit that I walk around with in my head all the time. These are the checks and balances that I use before I do anything, react to anything, say anything. Is it right though? Does this make sense though? Is this even likely though? Or am I reacting to the heat of the moment? Am I even reacting to what's in front of me, or what I am afraid might happen in the future? Or am I reacting to some part of my damaged childhood, you know? We have to think about these things. Speak less than you feel. Your feelings are valid, yes, but they're not always fucking right. I'm sorry, but like personal work will show you that. They're valid because they're pointing to something that needs dealing with, but it may not be the thing that is in front of you. And if you speak less than you feel, you give your emotions an opportunity to do what they're designed to do, which is just flow through you and then out the other side. They are not solid. You are not your emotions. You're not even actually your thoughts. So particularly when something feels really, really intense, just take a moment. Please, take a moment. Verify before reacting. It's a big one. Now, I think even just the willingness to verify something before you react to it is introducing enough of a pause for critical thinking to take over. And if something's difficult to verify, then why the fuck are you reacting to it? You don't even know if it's true. That's my point. Keep relationships intact where possible. You know, there's been a couple of things over the last 6 years. I can think of at least two that were big ones, where people divided themselves along certain lines and then just broke up relationships off the back of it. And like I said, I lost all of my friendships in 2020. Why? Because I held a different view. Because I wouldn't be because I wouldn't do as I was fucking told. Did that group really accept me? No, I don't think they did. Otherwise there would have been room for that anyway. The reason why this is important is because to get through the next few years, and there will be an aftermath, there will be an after of this. We're going to need each other. We're going to need people. There's far more that connects us than there is that divides us, even though you wouldn't believe it in 2026, planet Earth, but it's true. Again, avoid irreversible decisions at emotional peaks. That one should just be fucking obvious, but like we fall into that pit all the time, right? The final one there is accept that discomfort and danger are not the same thing. I mean, I'm Gen X, I was born in 1980, right? So I kind of rock the whole, yeah, but did you die though? Made worse by a decade of combat sports and whatnot. There seems to have been this urge to try and completely exorcise any kind of discomfort anywhere without recognizing the value in that, how that makes you grow. We don't grow by being comfortable. But if you've got to a point where you feel like discomfort is threatening, you will do anything to remove that discomfort. Escapism, all sorts of mental gymnastics. And maybe it comes down to like, yeah, but did you die though? Nah, you're sound. We all make mistakes under pressure. We all have regrets about things that we did in the heat of the moment. Fuck knows I do. I know, right? But is it not all, I don't know. Those mistakes that I made, that I'm thinking about, particularly at this point here, the things that I regret, ultimately, they weren't happening in a year as volatile as 2026. So did you die? No, I didn't. I was fine. But there's something brutal about this year. And I don't think that the year is going to be particularly forgiving. And there are a lot of big mistakes that people are going to make this year that could have been avoided by just like introducing one small moment of, is that right though? Do I need to do anything about it though? And if you're not worrying about the, inflamed nervous system, if you're not tweaking out because somebody said this or somebody did this and now you've got to react, now you've got to do whatever, right? You can actually start looking for the opportunities. You can actually liberate yourself to some extent, because I do think there is a liberating energy about this year. There's one last thing that I've written down here on my little list of notes. And for me, I think this possibly might be the most important thing. And that's, history does not give a fuck what people believed. It judges people on how they acted when the pressure was at the highest. When you think about any historical period that you've ever read about, watched videos about, documentaries, whatever, we have very, very little sympathy for the people who did as they were told. We always align ourselves with the hero. That's what I would have done in that period of history. Whether it was, avoid, right? But you know what I'm talking about. Certain periods of history. Yeah, that thing that I say sometimes, that we judge ourselves on our intentions and everybody else on their actions. I think it's a little bit like that. We don't really give a fuck how good somebody's intentions were if they hurt us, if they did something we didn't like. We judge them on their behaviours. History does the same. History doesn't care if you were trying to do the right thing. History doesn't care if you were trying to virtue signal your membership of the in-group. History cares about what you did. And I think 2026 offers us an opportunity to do things that we can tell our kids about and tell our grandkids about and be proud of. I want, wherever possible, for us to avoid reacting altogether. Just don't do it. Act deliberately. Act proactively. These things will be rewarded. Everything else, yeah, we'll see. All right. Know that I love you all very, very much. And I'll see you soon.